As always, welcome to Thursdays with Troy. I'm Troy Lambert, mystery author, editor, super plotterer, and your host. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Cecelia Mecca. I hope I'm saying your last name correctly.
You are.
Cecelia is an educator turned historical romance author with more than 25 medieval and Scottish romance books published. She writes the Amazon best-selling Border series and brand new Order of the Broken Blade series, which take readers to an admittedly romanticized time of knights and castles in medieval England and Scotland. She also has her hands full with the ultimate bad boys, sexy, wealthy, and swoon-worthy vampires, a venture not for the faint of heart. We'll probably talk about that shortly. The Highlander-loving vampire writing author can be found in Northeast Pennsylvania, where it is dark and dreary today, with a chai in hand, thinking up new ways to tame both medieval and paranormal playboys. She is firmly House Stark and Gryffindor. That is fascinating.
That's
Welcome.
important.
That is important. Welcome. But for today, of course, we're going to talk about historical romance, which is hot in more way than one. This is kind of an evergreen genre. Yeah. It's a favorite of readers and authors, but getting the plot and all the historical details right is critical to your success. I have found in my time as an editor and publisher that readers are not very forgiving when you get these things wrong, especially in romance and historicals. Yeah. So we're going to talk about keeping everything straight, how Plottr helps you do that, all those various different things. So first of all, why historical romance? What drew you to this genre?
Yeah, so I have just always been fascinated with medieval England, mostly England, medieval Scotland as well. But I've just always been kind of a medievalist. So I minored in medieval studies and English in college. And right at about that time, I was in college, probably just needing a break from my educational studies. I found romance, and I just happened upon authors like Julie Garwood and Kathleen Woodwis, who were writing medieval romance. And so I was doing that. I was already studying that. And so I was always thinking about how those two could be merged. And so, eventually they became two of my favorite things, medieval everything and romance. So merging the two, kind of made a lot of sense. Never thought I could do it for a living. I always thought, it'd be really cool someday to just write a book and maybe as a hobby or something like that. But yeah, so I kind of married those two things that I love.
That is actually fabulous because I am a mystery author and I am entranced by UK mysteries and all things. I just love that stuff. So let's talk about what the unique reader expectations are of this genre and how you meet those.
Yeah, I mean, obviously as a romance author, it's very character driven. Historical romance specifically, though, I always give kudos to, right now, Bridgerton is huge in Regency romance. I think those readers are even more discriminatory, but mine as well. You have to get it right. A lot of readers will say, this is the most history I've gotten in, the last 20 years or something like that. And they're pretty keen on knowing a word doesn't belong. And obviously we take a lot of liberties, and it's not history. It's not history. It's not historical fiction even. But getting things really wrong is a recipe for disaster. And as someone who's read the genre for, over 25 years, I respect that. I want to get it right as often as possible, knowing I'm definitely taking, some liberties as well. As I'm actually writing a series right now, I think that we're going to take a look at called Kingdoms of Myria. And I wanted to take more liberties. So I created my own world with this one. Not really intending to write a fantasy because there's not a whole lot of fantasy in it, but I guess by definition, it's its own world. So that's been a lot of fun too. But I wanted a little bit of a break from that. I have to get everything right because it's definitely, there's an expectation there, even in romance, believe it or not.
Well, right, exactly. And then there's the typical expectations in the romance. So, you have a double-edged sword with historical. Yeah. You get a little bit of both worlds. So we're going to dive right into your Plottr file. So I'm going to put that up on the screen now. So kind of tell me about, what we can see if I scroll down here through your Plottr file is that, top of the charts, we see Save the Cat, but we also see the romance 7 beats, the 7 point plot structure. So tell me about which one of these you start with and how you weave everything together using these different plot structures.
Yeah, so I don't know why it's in the middle there, but K.M. Weiland is one that I really highly use, I guess you could say, almost start with. But I have a terrible memory. And so as a former educator, hearing things many times and in many different ways is really how it kind of makes its way into your psyche. So I will study any plot kind of structure. And because I don't remember the details very well, I like to put it in there, even if I'm not hitting every one every time and every beat, just to be able to. So if I went to, say, beat one, I can look at, Kane Wyland and Save the Cat are probably the two, and that's why they're up top, the heaviest that I use. But all of those kind of have a little different thing to offer. And so that actually is one of my favorite things. That's Kane Wyland. It's her hook, but also that characteristic moment you see there. That's from her book. She talks about that characteristic moment, and I make sure I do that, answer all of those things, in every opening scene for every book. And so I put it there because, like I was saying, my memory's not great, and I don't want to forget what I think are some of the most important things. And so that's why you'll see all of those different structures. They each kind of have a little tidbit that I like to pull in. And even if I don't use them all, I do kind of scroll down every beat, making sure as it's kind of coming up, making sure I'm hitting each one of those that makes sense for this story. But that way I don't forget it. I know by now, 25 books, it should be pretty intrinsic, and it probably is, but I just want to make sure I'm covering my bases.
What I would say, just to let people know, is that even, 25, 30 books in myself, is that I use these things every time because my memory is terrible too. And it's easy to miss something. And readers know it. They feel it. It's more of a feeling. They feel it if you miss something. That's actually a really fascinating way to look at, each beat individually and go and look at the various different hooks and the various different things that you can do. I especially like that you threw the romancing the beat in here. I've used that for several different things. So how do you decide which type you're going to use? Does it just depend upon the story? Does it depend upon the pacing and how you want to pace things? Or how do you decide which one of these you're going to implement for each scene or beat?
Yeah, I know them well enough now that coming into a story, I just kind of have a sense of where it needs to start. And it always usually is with character. But by the time I'm getting to the plot, the one I'm working on right now, the one we're looking at, this is, my current work in progress. I'm really kind of relying heavily on Save the Cat. And that really is just because I happen to be taking a workshop that is over the next 3 Saturdays, kind of reminding me of, the Save the Cat writes a novel. And so it's been a while since I've relied heavily on it. So I thought, let's do that, just for the simple fact of, are there things that since I've read the book 2 years ago that I missed that I might be able to pick up? And sure enough, there have been. So that's the reason for this particular book. But a lot of them, there's so much overlap that really they'll all do kind of the same thing, hitting that, plot point one and the midpoint and the, raising the stakes and those kinds of things. And yeah, I just kind of have a feel for it at this point, I guess you could say, having kind of used these. And sometimes I'll go into a book and, I'll learn about a new plot structure and I'll bring it in or take them out. And I guess you could say this is just a constant work in progress. And I used to do this in Google Docs before Plottr. Google spreadsheets, and I have a big spreadsheet of all these things. This makes it a lot easier, obviously, because I could just scroll over it and see those notes and then have that quick checklist. So that's just one of the lots of reasons I love Plottr. But when I first was introduced to Plottr, my initial thinking was, how can I make it work so that I can meld all of these different plot structures together? So this is what I kind of came up with.
And that's actually a brilliant thought of basically polishing your craft all the time by implementing new structures and looking at what works where. Now, also what I liked was seeing your summary, which is, I'm assuming, your summary of the book, and then seeing word counts along the way for every beat. So tell us first about the summary. How much information do you include here, and how do you use this to keep yourself on track?
Yeah, so in the beginning, when I first started using Plottr, I was still in my Google Sheets and kind of doing both. But then I decided I really just want to be in one place. And so this, for me, kind of made the most sense where to put just a basic summary of the story. And so I use that as it's my initial, like, these are the thoughts that I want to get out of my head about what's happening with the plot. And that usually happens after I have at least the sense of one character, if not two. And so it's like a very general, broad, there's not a ton of detail there, but that summary kind of informs, the rest of the plot. And then in terms of the word count, again, I just don't want to miss anything. I don't like to leave things to chance. So I'll come in here every day. I'll, start the day by saying, I'm at today, 7,400 words. Okay. Taking a look at the top, where does that fall? right? So I'm somewhere between beat 3 and beat 5. And let me just scroll down and see, am I on track? Is there anything I need to add? I'll scroll over, say, the catalyst is a one-time event, so that's easy. But like, if it was something like theme stated or maybe setup where it's a multi-scene beat, did I miss anything? Did I incorporate all of that? Something like I said, the inciting incident, and you're not going to miss that. But if you scroll over setup under Save the Cat, which is the second one, those things in there, that can kind of happen anytime between 500 and 5,000 words. So if I was within that word count, I can go back and just say, okay, did I do all of the things in here? And again, this is kind of just a double check for my own memory. And I'm sure you can argue not all of the things have to happen every time, but they make the story stronger, in my opinion. So I just have those notes and make sure I do that. So I'll start the day by looking at the word count, seeing where I'm at, seeing where I need to go. And that's why I have it in there.
Right. And I love that, because part of the thing is, if you're going to break the rules, you need to know what the rules are and why you're breaking them. Yeah, breaking rules unintentionally almost always results in disaster. So basically, you've told us that you start with characters. So let's go over to characters and look at what you're doing in this area, because I actually love this too. So first question, obviously historical romance, and not necessarily this series because you've kind of created your own world, but do you often use actual historical characters and then fictionalize them? Or do you make up your own characters but place them in a historic setting?
Yeah, so unlike some of my colleagues that in books that I read, which give a spin on an actual character, which I absolutely love reading, I for some reason do tend to make up characters. And if I do have historical characters, they tend to be secondary ones. And so instead of kind of spinning off on real people, I will take those real people and use them for inspiration for fictional characters. So I've written a series, where you see Robert the Bruce, but really he's very secondary. So for the most part, these are fictionalized. But if I'm not starting with character in a story, then I'm starting with history. And sometimes if I don't have a real strong sense of the character and I'm starting with, okay, what's the premise of this story? I usually go to a year. So if this is like 13th century, I'll go to that year and I'll just read. And I have a lot of resources now for that. And, they say truth is stranger than fiction. It's so true. So many of the events that I use came from history, and it's a great starting point. So, but in terms of character, these are mostly fictionalized. And you can go over, if you want to take a look at this story, the fourth one down, Kit Baldwin, the bastard son. That's where, he's the main character of the book I'm writing right now. That's what we're working on right now. And you can see that also incorporates kind of different, structures as well too. A little bit of K.M. Weiland. I pretty much start with, you can see the wound, the lie, all of that. That's where I start. Like, what is the major flaw of this person? What do they want? What do they need? Yeah, I'm sure, like every author. And then we fill in the rest of the blanks from there.
Right. And actually, so I love that. And I love your detailed summaries that you have here. And I do love that I've as we look at some of your other characters, we see, different of the goal, motivation, conflict, and those different things used in the characters as well. So again, it looks like you're blending different templates to essentially polish your story and your craft.
Yeah, and so I make it a goal of, for me, professional development is where it's at. And so I do make it a goal to learn something new with every book. If it's not while I'm writing or in between writing, this particular book, it just happens to be I'm taking a workshop now on Save the Cat. So I'm kind of doing it as we go along. But if that doesn't happen in between books, I'll make sure to learn something new. And now I have a place to add it. And I pretty much add it, whether it's here in the characters, I'll create a new template where I'll put different things in there. And, I figure if I keep doing that in 20 years or so, I should have this thing down pat.
You never master writing, so you might as well keep trying. So, all right. So we've talked about your use of characters and different templates there. So let's talk about places and the different things. I see that you've got pictures in here, which is really awesome. That's a really awesome picture. So tell us about how you use Plottr to keep track of your places and to enhance that as you're going along with your writing.
Yeah, so you can see some of them will have pictures, others won't, probably because they were just mentions that I wanted to keep track of. And then some of the more important places like Braywood Castle, you see down at the bottom there, I come back to more often. So there's a little bit more information there. You can see the inspiration castle for it, and then linking out to if I want to actually get that floor plan, I think. But that just gives me a visual. So if I'm in that castle, I can, see what it might look like. And we were talking earlier, and I said, sometimes it's just that picture, sometimes it's a floor plan. But I've also kind of tapped into my husband, who's an engineer, and asked him to really lay out something for me. If we're going to spend a lot of time in a castle or a place, I need to be able to kind of see it. And so he'll map it out for me too. But yeah, I love being able to put the pictures in there, the links in there. I mean, everything about it. I'm honestly a huge Plottr fan. It works really well for my process. And it's helpful to be able to reference these any times. And I'll use the filter and kind of sort out, since there's 3 kingdoms in this particular series, I can sort out by kingdom, and you can see that tag is Ettingham, and there's 3 tags there are the 3 kingdoms. So that's just such a quick, easy way for me, depending on where I'm at in the story, to see, okay, what was that called, the EC.
This is actually a really good example for those of you new to Plottr. Is basically you can filter by different attributes that you put on your places. So in this case, we're filtering by kingdom, and there's a nice little notice here that says your places are filtered, so that basically you don't think that the ones that aren't related to that disappeared somehow.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about, since we filtered by the kingdom, let's talk about, basically you've got tags for the different kingdoms. So do you use these tags just in places? Do you use them with characters, or how else do you use these tags?
Yeah, I kind of tend to use them by location. You know, and I know as I go along, I could probably utilize them even more. But that to me, because I knew these books were going to be split up by location, I did split it up that way. But other books, I'm not using the tags necessarily by location. But this particular series, that was kind of the be all and end all of the series structure. So.
Right, and that just adds another layer that you can use for organization, basically, for your different things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go back and we'll talk about. So I noticed you had some notes in here, and I love the possible names, because this is an area I struggle with, is names. But so tell us the different things that you use here in your notes, and what you do with them.
So these are things that can kind of come across books, and like the possible names. So when I started book 1 and I'm coming up with all the names, this possible names list was much longer. And then as I wrote the books, I just kind of pulled from here. So anytime I saw a name I liked, or if I hear a name I like, again, that bad memory, I don't want to ever forget anything. So, and then if you look at some of the other ones, you could see things that don't really fit necessarily anywhere else. Those are notes that I just, they don't really fit within the plot structure, but things that I want to remember to do with every book. There's that characteristic moment. You can see that's important to me, because I have that in lots of different places. So to me, that's like really important for that first page or two. And just some other notes, buildings and ships, and the teasers and tidbits I always think I'm going to use more often. And I never end up. Later on, when the book is done, you like to have teasers and some of things that you can kind of put out when the book comes out. And I always think I should capture those as I write, and then I never remember to do that. So
this is something that you can use for blog posts or teasers on your social media or whatever, all those different things. And it is, I do like the way that you're using this as things that don't necessarily fit, like where are you going to put customs in history? It doesn't really fit on the timeline, but it's definitely something that you need to keep in mind as a memory help for you, because that's obviously that's the same way I use it. My memory is absolutely horrible.
Same here. That's why it has to go. And this is a work in progress too. I'm sure as I go along with this progress, this is the 3rd series I'm putting into Plottr. So every time I kind of add to it and use it, just a bit differently. So it's kind of evolved as well too.
Right. Exactly. It seems to for pretty much everyone. Now, one more kind of question that I have about historical romance specifically is obviously usually things happen on a timeline. How do you use Plottr to keep track of that time, like the when things are happening?
Yeah, so if you go to the project and look
so when we go to the series view and then to the time,
there we go. Yeah, there's the series view. That's how I use the time. I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but those are kind of the major characters up at the top. Not all, but some hero and heroines, the ones that will kind of come across books. And so I'm just reminding myself. So all of what you're seeing right now, that happened way before the book started. And then if you scroll down, it'll begin to get a little bit more detailed, because then we're jumping into the actual books. And then across the top, you can see the characters that go across the books. And I just wanted to know where they were at different points in time. And this is where the kind of big timeline comes in.
Wow. Wow, this is very impressive. That's an impressive way to use that series timeline.
Yeah, that's how I use
keep
it.
Track of, oh, wow. Book 2, book 3, book 4. and that you have the years afterwards. That is actually fabulous. And with the characters across the top and the dates down the side instead. So a little bit different approach than some of the ones I've seen, but this is actually really, really smart way of doing things and of keep tracking things. So how often do you have to refer to this? Do you refer to this often, or does it you kind of figure it out as you're outlining, and then, or do you come back as you're writing?
Yeah, so this is something that I created right off the top. So I had a series kind of outline, and then after, within the book, I'll come back here, a handful of times. And then when the book is done, you know how it is. You start one way and then the plot kind of takes on its own life. So I'll come back and, readjust a little bit. So when the book is done, I'll come back here and see if there's any adjustments to be made, make sure that, the next book kind of makes sense. And so I refer to this maybe a handful of times, but really I flushed this series out. All of these boxes were here before I started writing the series. And then they just kind of got updated a bit as I went along.
So you basically you update as you go along. You learn as you go.
As I go along. Yeah, definitely. Because in my first series, I had no idea. I didn't have a series arc. It's an 11-book series, and I only figured out probably 5 or 6 books in, I think that this, this is how it could end and things like that. So I always told myself, the next series I write, I definitely want to have more of an idea from the beginning, because then you can plant those seeds and it's more interesting. And so again, if there's new authors, I did not do this for 11 books. And then as I learned how to kind of plot better, because I started as a pantser, to be honest with you, I was very resistant to plotting. Now I realize how powerful it can be, because I know, something I plant in book 1 can be in book 4 now, to plant those seeds and then now see them come to fruition. It's so exciting.
Yes, it actually is. And that's very interesting, because we've talked to a couple different people that are what they would call reformed discovery writers, where they, we were discovery writers at first, including me, and then we transformed. So tell me a little bit about that transformation and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, it was a probably lack of awareness decision, because coming from education, I had taught writing and reading for 15 years, 20 years, if you count, the last 5 I taught teachers. So I thought I had a pretty good handle on what it took to write a book. And you know how this story goes, right? So when I did write my first book, turns out it wasn't as good as I thought. Writing is one thing. Writing a novel is a whole different, animal. So I wrote that first book and had to edit it. Looking back, it should have been scrapped, but I didn't want to. And I edited it probably 10 times before I got it right. And so definitely was looking for something to tighten up the process. And so book 2, I kind of did the same. By then I was going to conferences, and I just kind of came across someone was at a conference and they were presenting and they mentioned it. I was like, oh, plotting. Oh, I don't do that. But I probably need a better process than I have. So I picked it up. It was a fairly short book. I read it, and then I realized I was missing a lot of things. So even though I had read romance for that many years and I understood, climax and the various kind of classical structures of a story, I come from a literature background. So I really didn't, beats and plot points and all those things kind of were new to me, to be honest. So once I discovered it and I incorporated it, then anytime there was a new plot structure, like romancing the beat, when I was introduced to that second, and that was super little, I was like, oh, I'm going to fly through that. It was a writer's retreat. And then it was like, no looking back. And then I, of course, wanted to immediately marry the two, because I thought, well, which one's better? Well, they have 2 different things to offer. And that's where I started this big master spreadsheet. But Kathy Yardley's the one that reformed me, so to speak. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting to see whether that's a kind of a I'm frustrated, throw up my hands, I got a plot type decision, or whether it's, and for most people it's kind of a gradual change. I need to plot a little more, and then it happens.
Yeah, maybe. I guess.
So you also write in other genres. You write about vampires. So do you use similar methods when you're writing about vampires?
I do. So the vampires, and this last year I launched a contemporary romance pen name, Bella Michaels. But I use all of the same plot structures, and the only difference really is I don't have the history to fall back on. It's good and bad, and I don't have to constantly look everything up. But on the other hand, some of the more interesting tidbits come from the history. So creating a story that's interesting, that's, as interesting as some of the ones that you find in, medieval ages, is somewhat, I think, more difficult, because I guess coming into contemporary, I thought, boy, this is going to be so much easier. I won't have to do all this research, but it's really not, because when you're taking an ordinary event, it's just a different process, I guess you could say, because I'm not starting with the history, but everything else is pretty much the same in terms of how I plot the books. And because it's romance and character driven, it you know, really relies heavily on the characters. I have no idea what will happen in the plot if I don't know the characters, because I can't tell you how they're going to act or react until I get to know them. So that's usually where it starts for me.
Right, and that's why things go sideways, of course, because your characters go off on their own tangent, do their own thing, and that's where all that revision stuff comes in.
That's exactly right.
That is fabulous. All right, well, I've got another few questions for you that are kind of my standard questions. Is like, what other resources, you've mentioned a couple books and things like that, but what other resources, conferences, books, et cetera, have helped you get where you are today that you want to share with people?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of conferences, NINC is my favorite. I've been to 20 books. I love 20 books. Will be in Vegas this year. I'm excited to get back to those because we missed them last year, right? RWA was the first one that I went to, and I went to, I think, 4 or 5. RWA is Romance Writers of America.
Yes.
As an indie author, I found it was a little bit more trad focused. So in the last few years, I veered a little bit away from that, but I got a lot of really great information there, met a lot of really good people. So I'd say NINC is, and 20 books are the two kind of important ones that I'll be going to this year. Romance Author Mastermind, Sky Warren. I did attend that last year. Very high level. Loved that. There was, I call myself a Dawsonite. So I found Mark Dawson early on in my career. And I took the 101 course right as I was about to publish, maybe 2 months before, and kind of changed my whole publishing schedule, so to speak. So, and I did, you know, leave my education job after about 2.5 books. So something that Mark did got me on the right path. So I have nothing but respect for that team. Yeah.
Yeah. Something worked there, obviously. Something
worked there. Yes, I love the SPF guys. Yeah. I feel like I'm on a constant quest for information. So that's something I could kind of do and get on my own. And I know the importance of professional development. So I'll never slack on that.
So tell people where they can learn more about you, where they can stalk you. I mean, find you online and those type of things.
Yeah, I'm pretty much Cecelia Mecca everywhere, and I have the Bella Michaels pen name, but Cecelia Mecca. I know this is controversial, but people say I hate Twitter. I love Twitter. Twitter's like my number one still, but pretty much anywhere. I have a Facebook group, a fairly small one, but it's a nice little group called Launching Indie, and that's just a group for authors, just kind of a positive affirmational, like, let's go get them space. There's a lot of obviously great groups out there, but that's my little corner of the world. As an educator, I just can't help but share, you know, what I've learned, just to be able to help people not make the same mistakes and you know, maybe save some time.
Those groups are fantastic. Twitter, I'm a big fan of Twitter as well. If there's a question of the day, which is usually a top secret surprise for you, so you have no idea what I'm going to ask you, but we are solving the world's problems, and I have an especially unique question for you, because you write vampires as well. So you ready for your question? Do vampires really sparkle or not?
No, I don't think they do.
No sparkling.
No. I don't think sparkling is sexy, to be honest. I don't know. But hey, listen, who am I to say? I mean, if they want to sparkle, you know, somebody made a lot of money off them sparkling, and go for it, because I've read all of the books, and in my world, they don't sparkle.
Well, all right. I will agree with that, because I've tried glitter and it does nothing for me.
Yeah, I don't recommend it.
I know that the entire audience is surprised by that.
On that note.
So with that, yes, thanks for joining us with Thursdays with Troy, everyone. We hope you enjoyed yourself and that you learned a lot. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week on another Thursdays with Troy. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.